Welcome everyone to ACDE 176. So main thing today is the Denkun upgrade. So be good to get some updates on the devnets from the different client teams, and also to try and figure out what we want to do over the next couple of weeks and potentially over the holidays, as we have an ACDC scheduled next week, ACDE 2 weeks from now, and then I don't know if we'll have ACDC over the holidays and around sort of New Year's. So they're the last couple calls we have to sort of coordinate. And then after that, I just have a couple small process things around meta ETH, which we discussed last time, and then starting the discussion around the next upgrade. But yeah, to kick it off, I know we launched Devnet 12. We've been running some tests on it, so maybe we can start with just a status update on Devnet 12 and then go into the various client teams and where they're at. I don't know, Perry, or if Barnabas, either of them's on the call. Nice.
I can go. Yeah. So we've had Devnet 12 up since last week. It's been finalizing. During regular operation, we did find a red bug that's been patched now. On Friday, we launched Mario's Blobber tool, along with a new action it can perform that triggers slashing. So that's the new equivocation condition. And via the test, we found, I think, 1 or 2 Lighthouse Slasher related bugs. On Monday, those bugs were patched, and now we do have slashings on chain. So if you go to Dora, there's a section there where you can see some nodes are slashed. Once we did confirm that slashing works, we turned on MEV on more nodes, and we did find at least one MEV relay related bug. That's also been patched now, and we've rolled out MEV to a lot more nodes. You can see that there's a healthy distribution of delivered payloads. We're still seeing like on-off errors on the relay, so nothing's fundamentally broken, but there's still something broken that would probably be dug deeper by the Flashbots team. And I see there's some chatter on Interrupt now with Jim posting a potential map bug with Lighthouse, I think. I think that's pretty much everything we have on Devnet 12.
What, can you just clarify what's an on-off error?
We're noticing like a few error logs on the relay.
Got it.
We're not necessarily sure why. There's something about slots in the past. I think Shana from Flashbots mentioned it could happen when there are no transactions that the builder would be potentially building a block with, but that doesn't happen very often.
Got it. Thank you. And then there's a comment from Danny about trying to test the fallback to the relays by shutting them off from time to time. Have we done that, or?
We haven't yet. We need to still test the circuit breaker, but yeah.
Awesome. Um, yeah, any client team want to share some more granular detail from their end?
Still working on revamping some of our original design with regards to like blobs caching and verification layer. So I think we should be able to join Devnet 12 maybe next week, if not in 2 weeks. So that's just an update from our end.
Got it, thanks.
Hey, and I know, I think David was talking to Casey yesterday, but essentially, a lot of the security researchers are like super eager to help do reviews. The testing team and DevOps team are super eager to integrate y'all. So if there's anything, that people can do to help support y'all, to get you to the finish line, just make sure to reach out.
Yeah, thanks. We have got a bunch of good feedback from Justin from the security team already. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Terrence. Any other team? So if there's no specific updates, I guess what the teams feel like the right next step is at this point once Prism joins the DevNet, and obviously we find if we find any issues there, we fix them. Do teams feel comfortable moving to testnets, or at least the first one like Goerli? Do we want to do potentially a shadow fork in the next couple of weeks as well to see if we get more data out of that? Yeah, how do people feel we should be moving forward at this point?
Base is ready, full steam ahead.
Yeah, same in mind.
Aragon is ready. Lord Star is also ready.
No concerns on techie side. Yeah, happy to move forward.
And I guess, is there any team aside from Prism who's like feels like there's something big or significant that they still need to work on? Obviously, every team probably has some bugs and some small things to fix. But is there anything else that people are concerned with? And Perry has a comment about testing the slashers. Are there other clients which have slashers that's ready that we could test on the DevNet right now?
I'm pretty sure that's just Prism and Lighthouse feature supported.
Okay, so we can test Prism as soon as we have it. So I think if Prism needs a couple more weeks, and potentially we find some issues and fix them, and also not wanting to fork like a testnet over the holidays, I feel like we might be in a spot where we can aim to coordinate a fork on Goerli as soon as people get back from holidays. Again, assuming we don't find some other crazy issues that, or something that delays things by a few weeks. But generally, does that seem reasonable to people that like, I don't know when would be the first 2024 call, but using that as a time to set the fork date, and then potentially having the fork, 2 weeks outside from that. So if the first call is, on the first or second week of January, this means we'd be forking Goerli sometime mid-January, something like that. Does that seem reasonable to people at this point? And again, pending, like, obviously I know Prism has some changes we need to test on the DevNet, and like that could still reveal an issue, but assuming that after a couple of weeks it's integrated and it's also tested. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty pro conditionally doing that, assuming we can get Prism integrated and battle tested.
Got it. And then, so if we're aiming for that, oh sorry, Ben, please.
I just wanted to check status on something. So one of our concerns moving from targeting 2 to 3 blobs per block was around network propagation. Are we now satisfied that this is going to be fine on mainnet? Have we done have we gathered enough data, or is that something we need to do on testnets? And where do we fit this into the program and the planning?
So from my understanding, both the mainnet big block experiments as well as the organic big blocks on the order of even 1.5, sometimes near 2 megabytes that we've seen on mainnet, were really solid, and testnets continue to be solid, and shadow forks, mainnet shadow forks would be telling, at least to some degree, although all of those testnet related items are on the order of small. I would be supportive of, between now and mid-January, trying to do some multi-region, pretty large node experiments on the either with like potentially even on mainnet shadow fork level, just to really get a view on it. Let's see, what does Perry say? Yeah, so Perry, you said 300 nodes?
Yeah, the plan is that once every client's ready for Devnet 12, we're going to do one really big shadow fork, so something like 300 nodes. And we have the tooling mostly ready for that. Well, we'll find out once that shadow fork is up. And what's the issue? Sorry, go ahead.
The cost differential on doing that same thing on mainnet is on the order of many multiples.
Surprisingly, not that much. Goerli is really, really big right now.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I guess the main thing that we'd want, because in the gossip flow is not really execution against the mainnet state, but the big thing is the gossip kind of competing with mainnet level, probably transaction gossip is the main other thing that would be kind of telling, and probably switching from Goerli to mainnet, although we could potentially make sure that a Goerli mainnet shadow fork had a lot of transaction gossip. But anyway, I would be supportive of 300 or even ramping up to more if it's reasonable in terms of man hours and costs, even if it's like an hour-long test or whatever.
Yeah, I think we'd have to keep the test really small for sure. But at least one thing we've noticed in the past is none or all the shadow forks, etc., that we've done are too pristine. We're only going to get any real data for a P2P related upgrade from natural testnet. So at some point, we're going to have to bite the bullet and do Goerli. And I would make the case that we spend any extra money we're going to spend on better monitoring setup for Goerli and do it earlier.
Do we have an estimate of how many nodes are on Goerli proper? A crawler?
I don't have that at hand, but I can find that out.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to get like just even order of magnitude crawler data, because if we're on the order of like 1,000, I think that would be very valuable data. If we're on the order of 300, then it's like not much different than what we're gonna get.
The newest crawler has about 3K on Goerli versus almost 9K on 9K on mainnet. So I don't know how reliable the numbers are, but if the ratio between them is good, then it's like still a third of mainnet, which is pretty decent.
That's really good, especially with the way gossip should scale. Obviously, you can have degenerate cases, but it should scale with the log of the size, so it's not actually terribly different in terms of hops.
Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry. So if and okay, yeah, it's about a 3x ratio. Yeah. So we can aim to do at least one Goerli shadow fork by the end of the month. Then trying to fork Goerli next early in January, and then that'll be probably the time where we would change the blob count, basically. Like if we saw something going wrong on Goerli that was sort of attributable to that. But aside from that, there isn't really. I mean, we might see something on Sepolia as well, but all of those networks have like a smaller. Like if it works on Goerli, it should probably work on Sepolia and on Holsky. But Goerli is probably the last significant test where we'd learn something that makes us change the blob count before we go to mainnet.
Yeah, it makes sense. We're sacrificing it.
Hopefully not,
It's
but
going
yeah.
anyway. Yeah. It's okay if it is sacrificed.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, to summarize, Goerli network is likely where we'll get the best data on this. So as long as we've got the tooling and the kind of time to do that analysis at that point, I think that's fine.
And knowing that a Goerli shadow fork before, we will be spamming and monitoring for this condition specifically, so that if it fails there, we know it's probably going to almost certainly fail on Goerli.
Sweet. Okay, so I guess so in terms of next steps, let's get some more testing on Devnet 12, get a Goerli shadow fork up and running. As soon as we're back next year, we can finalize the Goerli fork date. Potentially, we can also have some proposals async on the Discord, and use the call only to like finalize things. But we'll know a bit better over the next couple of weeks how things are looking. But the aim would be that in January, Goerli gets forked. I see, Terence, you have a PR in the chat about an execution API change. Do you want to bring that up now, or is there anything else that people feel is more urgent with regards to?
I have one more question on the Goerli stuff.
Yeah.
Is the node distribution similar to mainnet? Not necessarily the validator, but the node.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this Ethernet's crawler, so I mean, if
it were way out of whack,
it doesn't
Gus
feel
is
like
not going to necessarily perform like mainnet, but
it doesn't feel crazy
correct.
different. But this is for EL, not CL, so I don't know what the CL looks like.
Yeah, okay.
And then
see if we can find some data.
In terms of the countries, it also feels roughly similar. So like, it feels like of the three testnets, by far the closest.
Yeah, okay.
So anything else on Goerli or shadow forks? Okay. Terence, you want to talk about the execution APIs?
Right. So little background in Cancun, when you try to get a payload from the CL to the EL, there is this optional parameter. It's called override, meaning that as an EL client, you can trigger CL client by telling there if there's some sort of like censorship going on the network. So censorship is a very subjective term here. This is EL client may have like different design implementation on how to observe this sort of censorship. Like for example, like a transaction that's been paying higher than normal priority fee, but it has been stuck in the mempool for a while, and the builders are not including it, blah blah blah, right? So so since this is available in Cancun, I wonder if any EO client has looked into this and implementing this sort of override feature. And the reason I am asking this is that because like us we have seen over the last few weeks, right? There are staking pools. They are actively discussing on delaying block propagation just to extract more MEV. And this may become a problem once we have blob transaction, because blob transaction also delay the block gossip, right? So imagine today we have blob transaction that is in the main pool, but it doesn't really like make that much money because they are cheap blob transaction, they are boring. And then as a staking pool, I will have the decision whether to include blob transaction or whether to not include it instead of just wait a little bit longer and get more MEV. So there's some sort of this type of game that the staking pool can play, and it's not ideal. So I think having some sort of like censorship override with some sort of respect on block transaction could be fairly useful. So I wonder if any client team has thinking about this or thinking about implementing this. Oh, yeah, like client has the comment saying that Mario's implemented it, but then they don't think they will merge it in the near future. Yeah, I wonder if anyone has any more like feedback, comments on this.
So we haven't implemented it yet in Nanomind.
Base also has not implemented it yet.
Got it, thanks. I can also add another comment on Discord later just to reiterate what I said. Yeah, I still think it's very important to have this early on because like 95% of the blocks today are built by builders, and builder has a lot of power on just like including like blob transaction and choosing not to include it. And I suspect in the beginning, blob transactions are going to be very, very cheap, such that the builders may not even care. And so there may be some weird information asymmetry there.
Yeah, and I guess to be fair, as Roman mentioned, like on the local setup, if a pool really wants to be playing these games, they can just override. But I guess also if we do see this, the equilibrium of what the priority fee in the normal case for L2s is probably going to shift to much higher. So hopefully you can find some sort of balance, but I agree. Some of these dynamics are pretty concerning.
Oh, Boris?
So I was thinking along the lines of what Danny just said, that that it just might be market. This block transactions will have to pay enough so as to offset whatever the fee is required, so that the proposer actually includes them. Because also it's something that risks their block to be reorged more. But I think it's different than with usual transactions, because this is now playing with these pools that are either publicly or privately delaying block production as much as possible. So now blocks not only need to compete with fees, but they also need to compete with that delay itself and all of the MEV that you can get out of delaying your block. I mean, this is a market that I think this wasn't prevented. This wasn't thought of when the fee mechanism for blocks was designed.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is true, but blobs can use the same chip as normal transactions, to compensate for the increased opening risk.
Okay. I guess what's the best place to continue conversation on this? Obviously the PR is like closed, but is there okay. Yeah, Terrence will bring you up on Discord. Yeah, which channel do you think makes sense? Or was there already a conversation on the Discord in one of the channels? Okay, we'll use ACD.
There's also a good post recently by Mike and Casper on ETH Research, kind of digging deeper into the time game stuff going on in general. If people want to take a look there to put some more brain power towards it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Terrence. Any final thoughts, comments? Okay. Anything else on Denkun in general? Okay. If not, I have just three quick updates on the meta EAP stuff that we talked about last week, but we have a meta EAP draft for Denkun. I forget why, but there's some reason why it's not merged yet. I think it just needs an EIP editor to merge it. And then we didn't use meta EIPs for a couple years. So instead of backfilling all of the meta EIPs, I created one to reference all of the specs for the previous hard forks, so that it doesn't look like the meta EIPs were always there, but it's saying like for this chunk of forks where we didn't use meta EIPs, here's where you can find the canonical specs. It includes both the EL and CL forks. So if people want to leave comments on that, I'm hoping to get it merged soon as well. And then lastly, so I created this thread on ETH Magicians to start discussing the scope for the next network upgrade. I know there was also an issue on the CL side on GitHub for where people could post suggestions, but there started to be some conversation on it. And I think, yeah, as we start wrapping up Denkun, then we can spend more and more time thinking about how to scope and prioritize things for the next upgrade. And I think one thing that's probably worth it for client teams to think through now is like, are there proposals that would cause the upgrade to be coupled or decoupled across the EL and CL? So the past couple forks were obviously coupled because we shipped stuff that sort of required it. But there's at least a possibility, I think, for the next upgrade that this is not the case. And so it's worth thinking through that. Like, is this something we want to explore, and if there are things that couple, how important are they, and do they risk delaying a bunch of other stuff? Yeah, I think that's yeah. Coupling sort of happened by default the last 3 times, but we should yeah, EL triggerable exits is probably the only one that I'm aware that requires the fork to be coupled. Okay, it seems there's okay, there's more popping up in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really love to see wherever Verkle goes to not be coupled, because simultaneously, I think we'll probably work on some sort of data availability sampling upgrade. And those are very independent. But obviously, then there's a lot of these small things that might be.
Yeah, and one thing maybe to think through is also how early or late in the process do we want to couple things? Like, say that we did Verkle and DAS, and they're decoupled, and then we choose to add EL triggered exits. Can we couple stuff later in the process? What does that look like? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, any other teams or people have thoughts generally about approaching the next fork, or how should we think about that? I don't think we should start discussing specific EIPs on this call, but yeah. at a higher level. Any thoughts? And I guess maybe, okay, so last question then. These past couple calls have ended a bit on the earlier side. So would people want to start discussing the next fork in more details, like in the next couple weeks before the holidays, or do people prefer to table that until early next year and sort of stay focused on the fork? Oh, like Lance wants to get into it now. We can do that too, if. Yeah, does it? Okay, it seems only like Client wants to discuss right now.
I'm down.
I mean, okay, so yeah, I think we should probably do most of this. Oh, after the holidays, I'm fine giving people a couple minutes now if they want to bring some stuff up, but POTUS.
I do agree that we should probably defer this to after the holidays. But I very much find it unlikely that this is going to be decoupled, or at least on the CL side, there are some kind of urgent matters with the growing validator set. So I think like the few PRs that or ideas that are being discussed on how to lower the validator slice or to reuse indices, or I mean to set up the stage so that we can actually lower the validator size, we should start working towards that.
Yeah, to be fair, on 7,002 or not on the max EV proposal, you could potentially introduce additional CL messages to counteract the ability for needing the EL. But there's not like 100% strong
I'm
dependency
happy
on
with
that.
the CL only fork. It's just that I don't. I don't see. I'm sure there's going to be EL changes that are also important.
And to be clear, I wasn't trying to push necessarily for a decoupled one, but I just want us to make that like a conscious decision, not just default decoupling because we've gotten used to doing that the past couple forks. Yeah. Okay, Guillaume.
Yeah, just regarding the coupling, actually, Vercol is mostly an EL thing, but since we're putting the proof, like we're distributing witnesses, and so far the decision it's not decision, but the approach we have made was to pass these proofs and witnesses via the CL, so it would actually be coupled.
Is that P2P only, or is that a consensus change as well?
No, it's I mean it's an execution engine change and then an a peer-to-peer. It's not actually I don't know how Mac and Gajinder implemented that in the States, so I don't think it's a consensus change. No, but it's I might be wrong. It depends on the implementation detail. I'm not 100%.
Oh, got it. Justin.
I just wanted to, I posted this comment in the chat. Has the ship already sailed on using meta EIPs for hard fork scheduling? Are we all firm on that?
What is the argument against it? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, again, I apologize for not being here last session. It was a holiday. But it seemed a little counterintuitive since we just spent a lot of time deciding, ERCs and EIPs should not be in the same repo because they have different audiences. And so I was wondering, like, why not just simply create a separate EIP for hard forks and scheduling? I'm sorry, not an EIP, a separate repository, rather, for hard forks and scheduling.
So maybe my practical answer to that will be because there's just one of those that happens every year, or maybe two. and it's kind of weird to have this separate repo for like 10 EIPs. That said, I'm not completely like if I don't know it. Yeah, I'm not super against it. I do think we want them to be like closely coupled to EIPs. Like where they were before was like randomly throughout the specs repo, and that's kind of hard for people to find versus like meta EIPs. You can just go to eips.ethereum.org and search for London, and there's like it pops up there. So that's like the main argument I see in favor of meta EIPs is just like they're easier to reference. Whether or not they like live in a separate GitHub repo is maybe not super correlated with that, but yeah, I think that's the argument for like by default having them in the same repo.
Okay, so traditionally when I think of meta blank, right, it's usually specs about specs. For instance, EIP1, right? This is where we define the EIP process and how future EIPs are to be written, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when we say meta EIPs, that is more along the lines of what I think.
Yeah, so we've been talking about maybe renaming them, which I'm totally fine with.
But to be fair, it is kind of a meta spec because it says this specification for this upgrade is these 5 specifications or something like that.
Yeah.
So by referencing an EIP, it is meta spec.
Yeah.
But I don't care about the name.
Yeah. I care more about the proximity than the name. And yeah, some EIP editors have made the same argument as you, Justin. So if we decide to rename meta EIPs to like hard, I don't know, fork descriptor EIPs, I'm totally, whatever name we come up with, I think is fine. But I think not having, like, first of all, having a list of what's in the hard fork, I think is really important. And we didn't quite have that the past, like the list ended up being the blog.ethereum.org article, which is not great.
100%.
And then having that list be close to the actual EIPs. But I agree the name is potentially not great. We can bike shed this off the call though.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop it. I just want to. It's not so much about the name; it's about the repo. That's all.
Yeah.
So, all right, thanks.
Just to chime in with respect to Workle being consensus fork on CL side, yes, it will be because execution witness is now part of the execution header, which will basically require us to have consensus on.
Okay, and I guess to be clear and to be fair, like some of these things are more like insert the new field into the data structure rather than dealing with like a feature beyond that. And so you're right, in a lot of decoupled forks, there might still be some of that like process upgrade that needs to happen without like a ton of effort happen. So we should at least like keep that in mind when we're talking about decoupling, because I could still imagine like Oracle could quote be decoupled, meaning the consensus layer makes sure to like give them a branch with this extra field in it, which could take not very long for testing, and then kind of come in together and make sure everything's locked tight at the end.
That's correct, because state transition has not changed on the CL side because of execution witness being added. Also, there could be a different mechanism in which execution witness can be part of blobs. So basically, it doesn't even need to have that kind of upgrade.
Yeah, and I guess just another point, like if we did, sorry, like if we had a data availability dominated consensus layer fork, there'd probably be an upgrade to the data gas limit, but on the execution layer. But like I'd still largely call that decoupled.
Okay, I think yeah, anyways, based on this conversation, I think for Prague and Electra, what we should probably do is then have people, I guess, signal now to people that if they want something, consider it's like the right time to start raising it, and that over the next month, I suspect people will like bring up a bunch of proposals. If client teams can keep an eye on both the ETH Magicians and GitHub thread, then we can sort of kick off the calls next year's, getting a feeling from the client teams about all the different proposals, their relative value, and kind of go from there. That seems probably more productive than trying to start discussing random EIPs now. And I think in parallel to that, one thing we discussed in the context of DevConnect is trying to do some sessions on like specific topics remotely after DevConnect to like get people up to speed on stuff. So if things like Verkle or potentially like a DAS fork on the CL are being considered and they're like pretty significant changes, it might make sense to organize a session for at least the two of those. And I don't know if there's something else, because I suspect those will take up like more time to go over and have like a much bigger degree of discussion than sort of a random small EIP. Yeah, does that seem reasonable to people? No objections, one thumbs up. I guess, yeah, we can try to roll with that. Okay, anything else anyone wanted to discuss before we wrap up today? Okay, if not, well, yeah, we can close out here. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you on the testing call on Monday and then ACDC next Thursday.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.